Great. All right. The live stream is started, and I believe that we are ready to go. So welcome, everybody. My name is Alicia Capello, and I will be your moderator for today's Lightning Talk session. Today's Lightning Talks, we're going to do something a little bit differently than some of the previous Lightning Talks in that we're going to have the two presentations back to back because we don't have a third presentation today. And then once those two presentations are finished, we'll take questions for both of our presenters at the same time. So feel free to enter any questions that you have directly into the Q&A window. If the speakers get a chance, they may respond directly in there as well, but everybody will be able to see any of the questions asked and answered. And if you wanted to ask a question verbally, just put your hand up at any point, and once we get to the Q&A session, I will allow you to unmute, and then you can ask your question verbally. Once I finish my little introduction here, I'm also going to post a couple of things in the chat, including a link to our code of conduct and the email address you can contact if you have any technical issues. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. You can turn the captions on if you need them by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. In some cases, you might need to click the More button first to find the Show Captions. So to get us going today, it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Lisa Longenecker, who is the metadata librarian at Case Western Reserve University. Lisa's lightning talk is titled Bridging the Metadata Gap, Using Generative AI to Improve Description and Access in Digital Collections.
Thank you. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, slideshow. All right. So hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Longenecker. I'm a metadata librarian at Case Western Reserve, and I work primarily with creating metadata for digital collections. So that's what I'm going to focus my talk on today. But a lot of the stuff that I mentioned can also be applicable to other resources like physical resources and traditional cataloging as well. This is a lightning talk, so I'm going to try to go through as much stuff as possible, but what I'm going to address today is how can you use AI in metadata. I'm going to talk about three different ways. One is to expedite your work, specifically using it for transcription, description, and subject analysis. The second is to use it to enhance your metadata by identifying key people and places. And then third, I'm going to talk about how I use it for quality control on bulk metadata. And finally, I will briefly discuss the limitations of AI. So first, I'll go ahead and get started with talking about how AI can expedite your metadata. Specifically, I use it for transcription, description, and subject analysis, basically to get Library of Congress subject headings. So the first thing to mention is that providing AI with a very specific instruction will really give you better results. If you're not familiar with this, it's called prompt engineering. And the way I like to think of it is I'm telling the chat, like ChatGPT or Claude, I'm telling it it's an expert, so it's going to respond to me as an expert the best that it can. Another thing to consider when you are crafting these AI prompts is that a lot of the free models of GenAI, like Claude and ChatGPT, do have daily limits on the number of questions you can ask. So if you can, at all possible, combine multiple questions into one prompt, that will help you so that you can ask, more questions per day. So as you can see on this slide here, I combined two different commands in this prompt. I said, you're a cataloging librarian that's been working at the Library of Congress for more than 20 years. Please transcribe the abstract from this paper and assign Library of Congress subject headings based on the context of this abstract. You may be wondering, why would I ask the AI to transcribe the abstract instead of just copying and paste? Well, when a lot of the materials that I work with are from like archival special collections and they're very old. Here's an example of one I was working with where the original copy that we received in our archives was very hard to read, and thus the OCR did not work. So when I tried to copy and paste that abstract into my metadata, I basically just got gibberish. So instead of taking the time to type out the whole abstract by myself, I was able to combine that in my subject analysis command, and it transcribed it accurately almost 100% of the time. So this saved me a lot of manual effort. And then next, the second part of that command had to do with the subject analysis or assigning those Library of Congress subject headings. Um, on this slide, you can see that I compared the subject analysis output across four of the major Gen AI chats. I tried Claude, ChatGPT, the free model, Copilot, and Gemini. The green and underlined subjects represent valid Library of Congress subject headings, whereas the red and italicized ones represent hallucinated subject headings or ones that aren't valid. Um, as you can see from this chart, overall, the language models are doing a lot better at producing valid LCSH now. When I started experimenting with this about 2 years ago, it was only getting valid LCSH about 60–70% of the time, but it's definitely getting better. In this experiment for this particular article that I asked it to analyze, Claude got everything valid. Those were all valid LCSH. And then the other three models only had one that was hallucinated. Um, that being said, you do want to double check what the output is. And I usually check this either by using ClassWeb if you have a subscription to that, or you can use that Library of Congress Authority website, which is free to use to check to make sure those are subject headings. This is a really helpful tool, specifically if you are not familiar with the subject that you are analyzing. So for example, this one, I was running through a technical memorandum from our Department of Operations, and they use like a very specific technical language, which I'm personally not familiar with. So in those kind of situations, the AI might be able to perform better subject analysis just because it has the terminology that you might not personally be familiar with. So then the next thing that I use AI to expedite my metadata is by asking it to create a description summary or abstract of resources that don't originally have one assigned. This prompt was really useful in the project I just mentioned where I was working with technical memorandums from our Department of Operations because many of those documents were from like the 1950s and 1960s, and the original authors did not assign any kind of summary to it. So for this prompt, I asked AI, you're an editor of the Journal of Operational Planning. Please summarize this text into a 100 to 150 word abstract suitable for a scholarly journal. Obviously, you can replace that journal with one that's relevant to the subject matter of the resource that you are uploading. And what I did with this prompt is I included, usually these memorandums would have like a 3 to 5 page introduction and a conclusion. So I uploaded that so that it could kind of give me a brief summary that I could put into the metadata to give our users an idea of what the memorandum was about. Implementing these enhancement techniques on a collection of over 1,000 technical memorandums has been really successful because that collection actually has now some of the highest views in our scholarly repository, which kind of demonstrates how adding more than just the basic title and author information to digital objects can really have a huge impact on the access and retrievability in digital repositories. Next, I'm going to talk about how you can use AI to enhance your metadata, basically by identifying people or places that you normally wouldn't be able to identify. So for this example, I had this image on the left from our Cleveland Playhouse collection. It was in a folder of production photographs that was labeled 1965 to 1966 without other associating data for me to identify the location or the people. So by looking at this image, I could tell that it was not taken at the Cleveland Playhouse because of this really unique architectural structure that they're pointing to. So what I did is I uploaded this image into Google Lens, and then I was able to find this scene actually appears to be the courtyard of Delta College in University Center, Michigan. And this can be right, 50-50, I would say. So I always go ahead and then whatever it suggests to me, I go ahead and search more images of that place just to make sure. And I was able to see, yes, there's that very specific architectural structure. So I was confident that I could put that information in my metadata so that my metadata record now had a location, and it also let me infer that this was part of the Cleveland Playhouse's touring group since it wasn't in Cleveland. Another way you can use this Google Lens is by uploading pictures of people, with a caveat that it mostly only will recognize famous people. Um, in this example, you could actually do two different things to get more information. You could either upload the image of the person, or you could use something like ChatGPT or Claude to help you transcribe the handwritten message. That could also help you figure out who it is. This image in particular is from our Frank O. Etheridge collection, and it came from a folder of basically like autographs that he had collected from 1927 to 1947, mostly of celebrities, musicians, that kind of thing. So I did not recognize this individual right away, so I ran it through the Google Lens, and it told me this is a photo of the legendary jazz pianist, composer, and bandleader Duke Ellington. And then again, I always double check by searching more images. In this case, there's a lot of exact images, so I was guessing that this was kind of used as a stock photo, but that led me to be confident that I could include this kind of information in my metadata record, basically helping the user understand who this autograph came from. So next, I am going to talk about um, how I use AI to basically do quality control on my work and check for errors in bulk metadata. Now, I'm not sure if everybody who works in digital repositories has this kind of workflow, but I know a lot of people will do their metadata in a spreadsheet. Um, Here's an example of one I did for Cleveland Playhouse. Basically, the first line of the spreadsheet are all Dublin core terms that will be recognized by our digital repository. And then each line of the spreadsheet represents another image that I'm writing descriptive metadata for. Now, these spreadsheets can get very long, 100, 200 images on one sheet. So manually going through each one of those lines and each element to do quality control before I ingest it into our digital repository, that would take a very long time. So instead of manually checking, I upload my work into ChatGPT. You could use any of the LLMs really, but that's the one that I use at my workplace. So basically, I tell ChatGPT, you're an expert at writing Dublin core metadata specifically to be ingested into Alma Specto. That's what our digital repository is called. For your university library's digital collections. Please check the attached descriptive metadata spreadsheet and let me know if there are any errors or typos in my metadata. Then what happens is it goes line by line and checks and lets me know what are the errors. So here you can see there's some spacing errors and there are some punctuation errors, some grammatical errors, some phrasing that it thinks is awkward. And then at the bottom, there were two images that had the same title. So having it tell me the specific like cell range where there's an error and specifically what is wrong saves me a lot of time from having to go line by line and checking everything. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the limitations of using AI for metadata work. First and foremost, you should be kind of careful as far as what you're uploading into generative AI. I wouldn't recommend, uploading something that's copyrighted. I definitely wouldn't upload something that has like personal identifying information or financial information, anything that might be considered sensitive. Um, Another thing to keep in mind is that there are a lot of biases that are built into these large language models, and the output might result in inequitable or discriminatory output, which is something that you really need to look out for, which leads to my third limitation, which is that using this AI for metadata, you really need skilled human oversight. So AI is not going to be able to replace catalogers or metadata practitioners completely because there's still going to be hallucinations you have to check for. You're going to have to still check for bias, check for, making sure stuff is meeting metadata standards and schemas, that kind of thing. And then lastly, something that a lot of people are concerned about are the environmental issues surrounded by AI use. Specifically that, creating and maintaining the data centers that house AI costs a lot of water, electricity, and other raw materials. So that is also something to keep in mind as to whether you think using it would be more beneficial than harmful. And that is all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right. So next, we have Jenny Bodenhammer, who is an assistant department head at Oklahoma State University. Jenny's lightning talk today is titled Remediation with the OpenRefine AI Extension. So take it away, Jenny.
Oh, had to find my unmute button. It was so good to hear Lisa's presentation. And I think mine is a good continuation, kind of on the exact same topic. Um, my topic is remediation with the OpenRefine AI extension. And you can see I'm also using very similar metadata files to Lisa with the Dublin core. Oh, I need to get to my presentation screen here. Can you still see my presentation? Ah, here we go. So let's get started. I do not know how many of you have had the opportunity to use OpenRefine. So I wanted to do this opening screen so you might have an idea of it. And there's two parts to this. You will have to, OpenRefine is free software. It's kind of like a spreadsheet, but it's a tool for working with messy data. And you can transform things in multiple different ways that you can't do in just an Excel spreadsheet. Or you might be able to do it in Excel, but it would be easier for you in OpenRefine. And if you want to download that, there's the website, and there's also the library carpentry, which is a training module for how to use it in your daily work. So, and then the second part of what you will need to know if you want to do my process is you have to download a separate AI extension that you can add into OpenRefine. And that there's a link for it down there. I will say it hasn't been updated since May of 2025, so you'll have to use an older model of ChatGPT, for example. Okay, so this is what OpenRefine looks like, just so you kind of have an idea as we jump in. You can see I have a metadata file similar to Lisa's with the Dublin core. If I open it up in OpenRefine, I have all these downward arrows in every column in which I can do actions. I can do a text facet, as I show in this in the left-hand side. I can do a text filter. I can do different things. If I show you this next screen, oh, You can see I can do an undo and redo. It lists all the steps that I've taken. If you look at the title column, you can see I made it in just one click, all uppercase to all lowercase. So I found this a good tool in my work. And so when I found out that they had an AI extension, I was very curious of how it would work. So the AI extension creator is a man named Sunil Natraj, and he saw these potential use cases for the AI extension in OpenRefine. And some of these are things we already know that AI can help us with in our metadata task. It can summarize really good. It can do translations, and it can help with the standardization and finding typos. And it can do recognition, kind of like we saw in the last presentation of finding photos. It can be kind of cool because it can extract information from a smaller from a bit of information and take it out, which is very useful. But I'm going to kind of take it to this third column, and this is content analysis. I'm going to show how you can basically use content analysis to double check your work, kind of like we did in uploading a spreadsheet to ChatGPT in the last presentation, but inside the OpenRefine environment. So it's kind of fun. So first, I want to tell you how I got myself into a pickle. It was a great idea. Back in the winter of 2024, me and a graduate student worker named Harini Devi Ramesh were working with about 18,000 abstracts that we had identified of our electronic dissertations and theses that didn't have abstracts. Yeah, there were theses and dissertations that didn't have abstracts. And we were like, it would be so much more usable, and it would look good on the page, and it'd be great for users if we could give these theses and dissertations abstracts. And I will say it's similar to Lisa's situation. A lot of these were pre-1965, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. And so Harini Devi was able to harvest text out of our electronic theses and dissertations. She wrote code, we ran it through an API, and she had a pretty good prompt. But mind you, this was the end of 2020, end of 2024, beginning of 2025. It was for scholarly abstracts. And we did testing right off the bat in groups of 20, and they all looked great. And so my bosses were like, okay, upload them all. And I got nerves. I could not upload them all without having to take a closer look at them. So in the summer of 2025, I had 3 student workers with available hours. And I took a sample of 400 abstracts, which gives me like a 95% confidence level that I have a representation of the whole. And in the process, they found 4 abstracts, all of them from 1950 and before, that the AI used the same language that was in the document. So it used really outdated and inappropriate language for race and intellectual disabilities. And I was like, yes, I knew I couldn't just host all of these. But now how am I going to locate those? So beginning in 2025, I was like, okay, I was playing with the AI extension in OpenRefine. So I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can get the same results the students got in their going through that group of 400 with the AI. Now, I lost the prompt I used, but it pulled up 24 abstracts instead of just the 4 the students pointed out. But some of them were kind of false positives. But for one, it did pull one that the students had missed as well, or was on the borderline. And so I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So I've been slowly kind of building it up to a bigger prompt and analyzing these abstracts one by one and seeing if the AI can tell me what is wrong, if there's anything wrong with these abstracts, or it would be okay. In the spring of 2026, this year, I made a much longer prompt. I actually used Gemini 3.5 Flash to help me write the prompt this time. And of a first group of 1,500 abstracts, it actually tagged 20%. And of that, 178 were false positives. And I was like, this is too many for me to check. But it did show me I was not thinking broad enough about what types of problems could be in those abstracts, because not only did they find race terms and terms that were negative for mental incapabilities and disabilities, they also found terms like maybe you want to improve your terms that are about slavery, and maybe, for example, white masters was a term that showed up. Maybe you want to improve the gender terms as they have changed over the last 50 years. The disability terms, terms about religions and personal beliefs, maybe things being primitive. This one I'm still kind of hung up on. I've never thought about homemaking, and we have a lot of homemaking theses since we're a state university from before 1950. But it is kind of an outdated term as well. So I had to determine what to do. I will say, since we're Oklahoma, we also had a lot of abstracts that the AI admit that use the word Indian inappropriately. And that's one thing that we definitely wanted to fix in our big set. So just recently, I've been working on improving that prompt, and I'm going to show it to you in a little bit. I wanted to get it done, get it below like 20%, and with over half of that group being false positives. So I asked it to explicitly flag terms and phrases. And then we started working on examples that were Oklahoma specific. And then to get rid of more false positives, we made sure that if it was a proper name, like a place name or a treaty from the 1800s or an actual name of flora or fauna, that it wouldn't just immediately throw it out, even though that name isn't as appropriate as it used to be. So here is this prompt. Oh, one more slide. So in this next prompt, I got a much better set of flagged items that I can go through and then improve in the future. It's out of the entire set of 18,000, I only got 5% back. And this is much easier to work through. I'm still debating on throwing out on whether to update homemaking and home economics into like the current title of that major and so forth, but I'm working on it. So you might be afraid to use the API and the cost, but I found it relatively not too difficult. And if you're only working with small bits of information, it's very affordable. It cost me $3.10 to analyze all the abstracts and to flag them for 18,000 items. So that kind of gives you an idea. Now, it took a lot longer to process. I will give you that. It takes about 2 hours or so to process 1,500 abstracts, approximately. So here's the prompt. I know I'm kind of might be going over a little bit. The things I wanted to point out is that high priority watch list and the fact that we were going to prioritize flagging specific terms. I liked our specific things for Oklahoma, such as, which is very important for us, changing Tulsa race riot to Tulsa race massacre. There were a whole bunch of, you can see some of the language that was showing up in these abstracts we wanted to improve. 5 civilized tribes is another very common term that we're trying to update. Yes, here's where it is. Homemaking to maybe a domestic science, or at least home economics. Yeah, the more information we got in, the better. And then if you see here in point 2 of this slide, you can see what we started flagging as false positives. I don't mind if we use the word Black as long as we capitalize Black, for example. For some reason, it was flagging different plants, and so that's one of the things we worked on. And then at the end, we had specific examples for it to fix. And I really do feel like spending the time, which this is at least a couple days worth, maybe 3 days worth, of playing with the prompt and running it through smaller to larger batches of abstracts to get exactly what you want is worth your time. So my next steps is to create a prompt and test it to make the revisions to all of these records we flagged, which is a much smaller bit. And now we will be able to look through all of that very carefully. And then we can use a human in the loop at the end to reread these abstracts that we are remediating and make them better. So instead of 18,000 abstracts, now we're talking about 900 some abstracts to go through. I think this is kind of doable. So just really quickly, I'll show you a bit what the workflow looks like in OpenRefine. And you could do this in multiple ways if you are a computer programmer, which that's not something I'm good at, but I'm trying to learn how, you could do it that way instead. I'm kind of wondering, I couldn't, like in Google Sheets and in uploading Excel to the AI, I couldn't get it to replicate it exactly how it's working in OpenRefine. But basically, I have OpenRefine where I have the column with the text of all the abstracts I created a couple years ago. And then you enter in your model and what you're wanting to use. And then there you can see in the little drop-down menu of the text of the abstract, it says extract using AI. There's another pop-up window. And you just paste, I took that whole long prompt and I pasted in that, describe what needs to be done. And then you can actually generate a preview to see if it's giving you the answer you want, and then you hit enter. And you can't see in the screen, you can see a flagged one and a clear one. But what's great about being here in OpenRefine, now I can immediately filter out all the flagged ones, and I can make a spreadsheet of just the flagged ones for me to now go in and remediate. I know that it's super quick. I just want to make a couple conclusions. Make sure your AI has directions. It's not a mind reader, even as it gets better and better all the time. And sometimes it will give you suggestions on how to improve. Make sure your prompts are good and you are being a professional, because garbage in and garbage out still applies. So spend time on crafting those prompts and test and test and test. And be careful in considering your budget and your choice of model before, during, and after the project. You can see in Lisa's presentation how like using a GPT-5 is going to do so much better than a GPT-4. But then always, it's a combination of human evaluation and AI evaluation that we're going to achieve the best results. My students can't catch everything reading through a long spreadsheet throughout the day. And my AI is sometimes going to hallucinate what's going on. But the combination used together, we can come up with good answers. And so here I was just playing with an AI tool. Even though I'm not a coder, I was able to make it work eventually, maybe a little bit by luck. And now I have a new tool and I have a couple new methods to evaluate and to create things in a spreadsheet type format. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me today.
Thanks very much, Jenny. That was great. Okay. Lisa, if you want to turn your camera back on, I believe that the first two questions that we have are for you. They came in during your presentation. So the first question asked is, first of all, that was such a cool project. Given how much models change when a new version is released, have you considered using an open source model like Llama?
I actually have not heard of llama before, but I'll definitely look it up after this. As far as how the models changing affect the metadata I'm doing, um, I don't really tend to build on the same like chat in my ChatGPT or Claude, so I don't think it impacts it that much. But as I did mention, it has been getting better as far as the answers on the Library of Congress subject heading. So, but again, when I was doing that project, I did check all of them. So I wouldn't have to like go back now and fix like hallucinated subject headings because we had already done that when we were doing the project.
Great, thank you. And then the second question is for the summaries, how are you indicating to the user that they're AI generated?
Yeah, it kind of depends on which like metadata schema you're using. For like if you're using the basic like Dublin core, you can actually just put it after the description, like paste that description and then dash dash like description generated by AI. I know if you use Mark, they're putting that in the 588 field to let people know that they've got AI generated metadata. So it kind of depends on the schema, but there's a couple different ways you can let people know that.
Great, thank you. Were there any other questions that folks had for Lisa or Jenny?
I'll mention something about Llama. You could use Llama and open source models in the AI extension in OpenRefine. When I used Llama at the time, and that has been a year ago, its quality was much worse than the GPT. Um, this is not my work. My husband's a computer scientist, and he has been trying things like Gemma and DeepSeek and Gwen, and he's getting better results, but I haven't tried any of his stuff in my work. I am dreaming of the day that we can have local models hosted at our own libraries that we can control and that will still give us great results while doing work. So it's not just owned by super corporations out there. I'm just wanted to throw that out.
Thanks. Well, I kind of had maybe a philosophical question for you, Jenny. So you had 18,000 abstracts. You didn't want to post them without some form of check. And so you went through what seems to be like a year's worth of work in order to validate that they were okay and or update them to be okay. If you were suddenly given 18,000 new abstracts tomorrow, would you trust that if you followed that exact process, that the results wouldn't need to be checked?
That is an excellent question. So my main research thought at this moment is how much evaluation do we need to do of our AI outputs? The idealist world, humans check everything, that we look at it, human in the loop. But if we want to do something that's never going to get done, or we don't have the people, but it could have a benefit, how can we go forward? If I were to do this again, I would go back to like what I've learned over the last 2 years and use a better model and use a better prompt. And when we had very similar to what Lisa did with the OCR and improving it as well, if we went through that whole process, I believe that the quality of them would be so much better than it is today that like let's say 5% of my 18,000 right now are basically unusable. I'm saying I feel that's a pretty good guess right now. I think that would be much lower. Um, but I would still want to use an evaluative method on it. The problem is when you have a black box, you don't know what's going to go wrong. Like I assumed there might be factual errors. My students, when they went through the 400 items, found no factual hallucinations. Well, there was a choosing of how you describe something. I had a student point it to, but she was like, I'm not sure you would call this an interview and a survey, but it was a person giving a survey in person and
Mm.
taking down information. So I mean, it's like I think that the language was close enough, but I was super surprised that it pulled the historical language from the 30s and the 40s. I knew, and that's the thing, I already had tagged um, theses with concepts that are distasteful today. that, we wanted to make sure that these do not express the view of OSU or whatever, but we keep them for historical basis. We have a good note for that. That's one of the reasons I double checked them after I saw the students had pointed out, but I was not near guessing how big of an issue it would be or what I would need to look into. Yeah, it sometimes I don't know if it was me or the AI, but sometimes it just took me a long time for it to dawn on me what the issue was. But yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you. Did anybody else have any questions? You can put it in the Q&A window, or you can raise your hand or in the chat because it's easy to look at. Well, if not, then I'd like to thank Jenny and Lisa for their presentations today. That was really great. And say thank you to everybody for attending and have a great rest of the Gale conference.